And I will now introduce our first featured poet, Rebecca Farmer. So let me get my notes. Rebecca Farmer, her most recent publication is the pamphlet A Separate Appointment, and it's published by New Walk Editions in 2022. Rebecca grew up in a large Irish family in Birmingham. She studied drama at Manchester University and for many years worked as a teacher in London. Her husband died at the age of 42, and her focus for a long time became the care of their daughters. After she resumed her writing career, her debut pamphlet, Not Really, won the Poetry Business Pamphlet Competition, and in 2017 she completed a PhD at Goldsmiths. She has been a writer in residence at Gladstone's Library and was awarded a Hawthornden Fellowship. Now, Rebecca, I think you've joined the audience on several occasions, so I think you know what's coming next, because I always do a little reflection on the work of a featured poet. And so I read your poems, and the first thing I notice is in how many of your poems there are sounds, inner rhyme and near rhyme, and they are woven so close together that the poem becomes a tightly knit package of meaning and deeper meaning. For instance, in your poem about ghosts and time, there's a keening E sound, the sound almost of an old door slowly opening. And there are images bringing in an extra sense of ghostliness, like the dog that is a black and white film, or people wringing their hands like Lady Macbeth. I specifically like that one. And those ghosts take an important place in these poems, often explicitly, sometimes implicit, but always there, lingering, drawing us into another world, that of the past, one where imaginary leaves fall from imaginary trees, as it says in one of your poems. And there's also a question I'd like to ask you before you read. And my question for this event, for this month, is, what has poetry taught you?
Many things. I think most particularly it's taught me to pay attention to things. There's an Irish poet that I like a lot who lived in London for a long time called Louis MacNeice, and one of the poems, I think lots of you will probably know it, but it's a poem, doesn't stop me loving it, but other people love it, which is called Snow. And when I did some research on MacNeice, I was let into the BBC archive, and somebody wrote to MacNeice to say, oh, I really want to know what gave you the idea for this poem. And he wrote a really lovely letter back and said, actually, that's what happened. Somebody brought a bowl of roses into a room, and it was snowing outside, and I was peeling a tangerine. And that's what started that poem. And it seemed to me, well, it was that and MacNeice, obviously, but it was paying attention. So I think in so many other poems, I thought this person has really paid attention, whether it's to their feelings or sounds or all sorts of things. So I think that's it.
What a great reflection. Thank you for that. So now it's time for us to pay attention to you.
Oh, well, we'll see how we get on. I must show you this A Separate Appointment first, before that's the pamphlet. And I'm showing it to you because I really love the cover, which comes from a design by an artist called Susan Aldworth, who did a big projects on sleep. And and then my daughter did the design for the actual pamphlet. So I just wanted to share that with you before reading. So thank you to Poetry Lit for inviting me here. And also thank you very much for that introduction, which I found really interesting. I thought, oh, really? And thank you to all of you for being there. It's wonderful to be reading with Nancy, because I've loved her work for a long time, and she's taken me to a great many places. So I'm delighted to be here with her. Recently in the UK, I know this isn't worldwide, but recently in the UK, we switched to summertime. And I'm still finding that difficult. I do, in fact, find time rather difficult. I don't think I have a very good sense of it, and I'm not the only one. So I'm going to start by reading a poem called The Ghosts, about the ghosts rather. And it's called The Ghosts Are Confused by Time. They sense the clocks have changed, but can't tell if an hour's been lost or gained. It's a struggle to name the day of the week. Tuesdays sometimes felt like this. There isn't a deadline they have to meet. There are no further appointments they're expected to keep. Like insects trapped between panes of glass, the ghosts feel held between night and day. They've entered a time zone in which it seems even the young find it hard to dream. When I was putting together the pamphlet that I just showed off, I was surprised by all the poems that are in it that are about waiting. And I suppose we do spend a lot of time waiting. A new poem could be about waiting for the Zoom to let me in. But this next poem is rather a different kind of waiting. I found myself waiting in a place called the Merchant's House, which some of you may come across. It's in New York, and it's preserved in the 19th century. When I was there, it was all arranged for a Victorian funeral. Well, of course it was. Waiting in the Merchant's House, East 4th Street. Every curtain drawn, every mirror blacked. The house is shrouded like the corpse itself. I wait in the vestibule, expected to admire feather-painted walls in the colours of sienna. Every door closed, every orifice blocked, each biscuit wrapped and sealed with wax. I smell lilies and decay. My breathing is shallow, my corset tight-laced. I unbutton my gloves. My father was in the Navy, and he was actually in submarines, which I find horrifying when I went on a submarine. Can't imagine it. There's a lot of waiting if you're in a submarine. Submarine, 1943. My father is sewing red roses on a white linen cloth. He waits with 30 men, each breathing in the other's smell. Some write to sweethearts, letters they might not send. Others sweat and chew the oil from fingernails. They long for a cigarette. Someone listens for a pulse of sound from the enemy they can't see. Fear tastes like metal on my father's dry tongue. He can hear his heartbeat as the shadow dives deeper. And from his rough hands, petals unfurl in the stifling heat. He actually learnt two things in the Navy. One was embroidery and the other was boxing. It's an interesting combination, I think. I'm going to go on to read a couple of poems from the first pamphlet I published. As you've already heard, my husband was diagnosed with cancer when he was 40, and he died when he was 42. In that pamphlet, at the heart of the pamphlet is a sequence of poems relating to that time and the periods afterwards. So I'm going to start by reading one of those from that experience. Not really. It's November. You are walking. This morning it was dark and raining, but now the afternoon is convent blue and the squashed leaves shine. Your dog is a black and white film flickering between the trees. Then it starts. Frame by frame, it all starts in your head again. It's August and it is hot. Fans will not cool the bedroom. Home care give you a biscuit tin of drugs. You read Christmas selection on the lid. They ask him if he's in pain. Not really, he says. You curl beside him and he strokes your feet. He says, we're going to get a parking ticket for this. They tell you he is dying. He tells you to hurry. The audience is going in. After he died, a palliative care doctor told me that she thought I was finding it harder to cope with his death because I'd never believed he was going to die. I have to admit that even though I had a very Catholic upbringing, I had no idea what death meant. So I didn't know how I could believe in something. I just had no idea what it could be. And afterwards, this was hard. I think many people find it hard. Somebody's not there. Where have they gone? Why aren't they sending you a postcard or writing, getting in touch, just letting you know they're all right? So that's when the ghost poems began. And I must admit, I haven't got much sense of imagination with ghosts compared to what I was taught as a child. So this is a very early ghost poem. The fridges of ghosts are tall and slim. They do not smell of anything. No bacteria grow in yogurt pots, nor chicken bones fester, meant for stock. Bacon doesn't moulder past its sell-by date. Ghosts store nothing which decays. They wrap stones in cling film, arranging them on shelves in size, while letters, lists, and kisses lie like lettuces in drawers, as the ghosts freeze old memories in cubes and keep themselves amused, photograph each other on their phones, or open and close the door to admire the contrast of shadow and light. Sometimes they climb inside to escape the terrible loneliness they feel outside. Well, after that, let's get back to reality, or what passes for reality. I recently moved out of London, so of course I find myself writing about London all the time. Now I'm not there. I love London, and London is a great many things. But the next two poems I'm going to read about are about one particular aspect of London, which perhaps it's hard to love, which is the high-end property market. And with this high-end property market comes estate agents. The estate agents take a tour. Ladies, follow me. I would love for you to see the spectacular gardens. Like long-legged spiders, we weave past bowls of red amaryllis and scented candles. Our fixed smiles and matte lipstick give nothing away. We glide through studded doors into the still scented air. Here, she asks us to admire the permanent planting strategy bound by hedges of evergreen from which nothing can escape. Our guide demands we appreciate how it echoes Bridget Riley with its movement in squares. Ah, Bridget Riley, we repeat. Our dark suits coordinate with the water features slate. We pay attention to fragile etched lines, a homage to London's lost rivers. London lost. On past a phantom rolls, which may be a sign that someone drove here, might live here, though we see no one apart from men in uniform who sweep the imaginary leaves which fall from the imaginary trees. The next poem is very new, exceptionally new actually. So it's not in either of the pamphlets, and it's always a bit dangerous to read something new, but then I quite like that danger sometimes. It's also about London, and it's about a landmark that I've always loved, which is Battersea Power Station, this sort of amazing Art Deco building that was in fact a power station, and not the only one in the world, I gather. Well, it's no longer a power station, and everyone wondered what it would be. Well, now we know. Sabotage. Coming soon, it will be luxury. Swear it by the light of a fluorescent painted moon that's been all over the world, but rests now above the entrance to the Cathedral of Power, where mountains of coal once belted out smog and London's electricity into a black and white world that knew the difference between what was right and what was wrong. Shine a light into the darkness of the dark night. 4 Doric chimneys and all that brick, what you might call iconic. Before you go inside to experience the oh so real nightmare world of unforgettable corporate gifting and everlasting lip gloss that lies in front of you, and you realize that what you must now do is shock. Don't know if anyone's been there, but it's just like being in an airport, really. Any airport, any part of the world. So we probably all need to escape after all of that. And I think most of us became very aware of the need for frequent escapes during the pandemic. So the final poem that I'm going to read combines 2 of my favorite escapes. One is watching old films, and the other is the sea. I was born in Birmingham, so about as far from the sea as you can be in the UK. Meeting Cary Grant in St. Ives. We hired a car, left the city, drove 300 miles to the west, did what they told us to do, wore masks, kept ourselves to ourselves, obsessively sanitized and wrung our hands like Lady Macbeth. That morning, we stood in the sea. Pounded by waves, we clung to each other. No time to think of death, only of holding up, not going under. Later, we didn't mind the cliche of moonlit cliffs. We'd forgotten there were stars. Fear returned the night before we left. That's when we met the man in a grey suit, saw his reality shift between sips of a martini at the plaza on 59. We loved his surprised look, his easy smile. We knew how it felt to stand at a bus stop, sprayed by bullets from a crop duster. In a race for life, you take the train north by Northwest. Well, thank you for listening, and I leave you with Cary Grant. Can't do better than that.
Thank you so much.